Similarly, in another egregious case, since June last year, Bahraini civil society groups attempting to cooperate with this council and its mechanisms have been interrogated, intimidated, subject to travel bans, and even arrested or detained, causing an atmosphere of fear. Civil society representatives coming directly from Bahrain have significantly decreased over the last year, which is noted in the current session of this council. And we are seriously concerned about the detention of Mrs. Ebdesam Abdul Hussein Ali Al-Saig on charges most likely related to her participation in the March session of this council. She has reportedly been beaten and sexually assaulted and remains in detention. Since this report is limited to reprisals against people cooperating with the UN, and that's an important point that needs underlining, the cases covered in it represent only a small portion of a far more generalized backlash against civil society and others, especially human rights defenders. Some states have been mentioned in several of the SG's annual reports since 2010. China and Saudi Arabia have been mentioned in 6 of them. Bahrain, Iran and Sri Lanka in 5, and Algeria, Israel, the Sudan, Tajikistan and Venezuela in 4. Intimidation and reprisals undermine several human rights, in particular the rights of freedom of expression, association and assembly. This is why we believe the significance of this report goes far beyond the individual cases contained in it. I think we should see these individuals as the canary in the coal mine, bravely singing until they are silenced by this toxic backlash against people, rights and dignity, as a dark warning to us all. Reprisals take many forms, including intimidation, harassment, threats online and off, and derogatory media campaigns. We are aware of several cases of travel bans, asset freezes, and legislation aimed at penalizing organizations for engaging with UN human rights mechanisms. Individuals have been disbarred or dismissed from employment, their homes searched, and their offices raided. We're aware of cases where individuals we are in the middle of communicating with have been abducted, detained, held incommunicado, or disappeared. There are also many cases involving prolonged arbitrary detention as well as torture and ill treatment, with some victims threatened, blindfolded and beaten. One case involved forcible psychiatric treatment, and we know that some of our partners are today suffering in solitary confinement, a punishment likely made worse precisely due to their efforts to cooperate with UN mechanisms. Some cases include sexual assault and rape in detention against both women and men as a method of torture. In some of the most severe cases, brutal measures imposed by states as reprisals have been justified by claiming that the individuals concerned were being charged with terrorism or cooperation with foreign entities with the intent to damage the reputation or security of the state. I have personally raised a large number of cases with concerned governments, using a diplomatic approach, at least in the first instance. While some governments have been forthcoming and engaged with me promptly and constructively, others have not. I thank those who have engaged with me on this important mandate, and I hope we will find acceptable solutions on the cases discussed. Now, the UN relies to a large extent on information provided by our civil society partners and others. We depend on them to highlight areas of concern, alert us to alarming situations, and make recommendations. I salute the extraordinary courage that it sometimes needs for the victims and their families to come forward and share their stories with us, and also the dedication of the civil society organizations who act on behalf of those affected. We have reason to believe that there are many instances of intimidation or reprisals which have not been reported to the UN, including for fear of the consequences. I would welcome the further sharing of information on individual cases and action taken at both international and country levels to protect individuals and groups. I encourage all of you to cooperate with me in this regard. Excellencies, my final point, we are all aware of how this Council gets criticized. I can conceive of no higher or self-evident duty, either of council members or of secretariat staff such as myself, for us to do more to defend the defenders of human rights. It is frankly nothing short of abhorrent that year after year we are compelled to present cases to you, the UN membership, of intimidation and reprisals carried out against people whose crime, at least in the eyes of their government, was to cooperate with the UN institutions and mechanisms whose mandate, of course, derives from you, the UN membership. Our slogan and task is to stand up for someone's human rights today. I do not think there is any group of people for whom we have more of an obligation to stand up than those brave souls who have been harshly punished for cooperating with your institutions. Thank you, Mr. President.